Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to what, for me, is sadly our last class together in Political Society. This is lecture 27, Dignifying Punishment, Human Rights, and the Future of Imprisonment. And I very much wanted to end, having spent our Tuesday together talking about torture and what it means that California has engaged in conduct that, at least objectively speaking, looks like torture on a fairly massive scale, and certainly amounts to cruel, inhuman, and degrading punishment. I can't leave that topic without saying I still feel really uneasy with the fact that as a state and a society we're not having any kind of public discussion of that. I think that tells us a lot about prisons and the way we think about prisons, that we can have something like that happen, and it still doesn't quite cut through. Nonetheless, I wanted to shift the emphasis on this, our last day together as a class, to a more hopeful theme. As you know, to me, the most important part of Flat right there in the heart of all that darkness associated with torture, is the court's very strong recognition of human dignity as an essential feature of prisoners that does not diminish because of their legal status. And I just want to read you from Brown versus Plata. As a consequence of their own actions, prisoners may be deprived of rights that are fundamental to liberty. Yet the law and the Constitution demand recognition of certain other rights. Prisoners retain the essence of human dignity, inherent in all persons. Respect for that dignity animates the Eighth Amendment prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. Now, as you know, the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment is the closest thing we have in our Constitution to an expression of a commitment to human rights for prisoners. So it potentially means a great deal that dignity animates that amendment, because as we've seen, it's an amendment that comes out when we challenge or are concerned about the length of prison sentences, about the death penalty, about the conditions in which prisoners are housed, and it may also reach many other issues in our criminal justice system, including how people are arrested, often degrading conditions of presentation to the public, etc. So there's the notion that dignity animates the Eighth Amendment in the heart of Brown sort of leaves us with a bit of a paradox, right? What does that mean? On the one hand, it seems to mean you can't torture prisoners. Well, that's good, but it doesn't get us very far toward a more legitimate system. But it might mean a great deal more. It might mean that if you really have to regard the human dignity of prisoners, if you really have to recognize their rights that aren't forfeited with their right to liberty, right, which is lost in prison, but if they retain all the rest of their rights, at least those associated with human dignity, then much about our prison and correctional system might be up for challenge. So today we won't have time to canvass all those ways in which it might be up for challenge. Instead, what I want to do is take you to a place where right now today, dignity and this human rights framework is a much more important part of the legal infrastructure for prisons and criminal law than it is yet in the United States. And in that sense, it's sort of it's a way of pointing to what the future could bring for us, a more positive future. And that is the European community, not the European Union, which is that institution you may have heard about that may be on life support now. We're not quite sure. But the European community, or the Council of Europe, I think is the technical name of it, is a body that represents all European countries. I believe, except for Belarus, at the moment it's still not necessarily in it, but I think virtually every other country in Europe is in it and bound by the European Convention on Human Rights. And it is that structure that I want to suggest to you today is a place to look. And for those of you who may be interested in doing comparative work on an honors thesis or a paper next year, maybe here at Cal, something that compares American to European corrections or prisons or punishment would be a very fruitful way to go. Now, just by good fortuity of the fact that his visit is commencing today, I'm able to bring to you someone who can check my utopian desire to paint Europe as an absolute palladium of human rights to which we ought to look if we want to reimagine how prisons and punishment might be reconfigured in the United States. One of the great advantages of being a student at Berkeley is not only that you get, I hope you think, a world-class faculty and set of graduate student instructors in front of the podium on a regular basis, but because it is one of the world's truly renowned centers of global learning, we get some of the world's best scholars coming through as visiting scholars. I want to introduce to you today one of those scholars, Leonidas, my longtime friend and somebody I've learned a great deal from about European penality, and especially his area of, in some ways, most immediate interest, penality and punishment in Greece. And Leonidas is the co-editor of this very interesting and important book, Crime and Punishment in Contemporary Greece. Leonidas is the lecturer and also the deputy director of the Center for Criminal Justice at the School of Law. I'm a lecturer in the School of Law at Queen Mary, which I understand is part of the University of London system. Like the University of California, the University of London is actually a vast system, and Queen Mary is one of, I guess, the colleges within that system, and Leonidas is on the faculty of that law school. He is the editor of a number of books. I just mentioned Crime and Punishment in Contemporary Greece. He's also the editor very recently of The Arts of Imprisonment, Control, Resistance, and Empowerment, and also Roots, Rights, and Sites of Resistance, The Banality of Good, which came out in 2010. He's hard at work, and I think we'll be working while he's here at Berkeley for the next month, on a monograph called The Punitive Heart, Neoliberal Capitalism and the Psychopolitics of Crime Control, which is fascinating title that we should just have me shut up and have Leonidas tell you about that book. But instead, I've kind of cabined his role today as one of bringing us some reality checking about Europe. And so with the fact that Leonidas now has a live microphone, he now has my permission to interrupt me at any time. But what I want to do is, in some ways, set up what may be an overly utopian picture, and let's just see whether Professor Leonidas kind of knocks that down. Greece, I think, is a really interesting comparison with the United States because, first of all, Greece has roughly the same number of prisons that we do. Actually, many fewer prisoners, but about 34 prisons, which is about what we have in California. They have about 10% of the prisoners and about a third of the overall population. So you can see that we imprison many more than Greece does. And yet Greece, as Leonidas has shown in his recent work, has undergone its own prison boom. I don't know if we can call it mass incarceration. I'll leave him to opine on that. But Greece also has grave difficulties, as he'll tell you about, in the quality of life in its prisons, and also grave difficulties with overcrowding, which are both problems that are very real in California, obviously. So, in some ways, thinking about what the European community's human rights framework could or may do for Greek prisons is a very important test case of what a more human rights approach could do for California prisons. So let me just kind of walk up to that a little bit. Historically, up to this moment in time, up to Brown versus Plata, May 2011, prisoners' rights as a legal matter in the United States have primarily been part of what we might call civil rights law. Now, you might say civil rights, human rights, what's really the difference? And we don't have time by any means to go into those differences fully today, but I recommend you all the excellent book by historian Carol Anderson, Eyes Off the Prize, which shows you how the civil rights movement in the 1950s originally focused on human rights as its beacon of what race relations ought to be rearranged or remade in terms of in America. And they actually began to take the case of American racism to the United Nations in some of its earliest hearings. As you can imagine, at the beginning of the Cold War, America's leaders weren't too thrilled with the idea that the UN might be investigating segregation and things of this nature. So political pressure was put on the civil rights movement, and from that moment on, from about 1950 on, civil rights came to mean something a little different than human rights. And in many ways, and it's way too complicated a case for me to lay out now, but this notion of race-blind civil rights, which Michelle Anderson writes in the new Jim Crow, right? The idea that our civil rights gives us formal equality, but often leaves tremendous staggering inequalities, as in the disproportionate impact of prisons, on the table. Civil rights has in many ways been moderated by these political forces so that they're valuable to prisoners, but they're also very limited. The civil rights era prison condition cases that remain very important precedents for any attempt to protect prisoners' rights today are based in many ways on a presumption that prisons are sound institutions with a strong rational basis in the dangerousness of their inmates. They by and large accept the notion that prisons, the normal prison, is a decent and progressive institution, and they contrast the actual conditions in the cases that come up with the reality that American prisons are presumptively progressive and decent in their conditions, even if severe in the sentences that they impose. That has made civil rights-based prison lawsuits harder and harder to win on, and more and more difficult basis for trying to increase the protection of prisoners' rights. And that's what makes Brown versus Plata so exciting to me, that it may represent a return, if you will, toward human rights rather than civil rights. Now, we know that from historians like James Whitman, and I talked a bit about his work to you before, his fantastic book, Harsh Justice, which very much makes the argument that America lacks the same public law commitment to dignity that has been so powerful in Europe. And here I'm just contrasting the language of Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which speaks about torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, to the language of the Eighth Amendment. Whitman would remind us that America's Eighth Amendment doesn't have the focus on degradation, and therefore as much attention to dignity as we find in the more modern European Convention. But if Plata is as important a case as I think it is, the Eighth Amendment now incorporates these concerns about dignity. And indeed, part of what we saw in Brown versus Plata is a real sense of humanitarian shock on the part of the Supreme Court and what they saw as the conditions in California's prisons. During the oral argument, Justice Breyer, as we talked about, had the lawyers actually take a look at the pictures of the dry cells where the mentally ill prisoners were being kept for weeks and months to prevent their suicide, but in incredibly degrading conditions, naked and often in their own waste. And he was so visibly, or I should say audibly, because it's only an audio record that we have of it, but if you go online and listen, and you can listen to any Supreme Court argument, at least the modern ones, online, you can hear his voice, and it's shaking with moral shame and a kind of outrage. He says to the lawyer, now you've looked at them, I've looked at them, and what is the answer to that? How can I, or if you were in my position, what would you say? And he goes on to say a few sentences later in the same exchange, you've got a big human rights problem here. And that's language that, as I indicated before, American Supreme Court cases have tended to shy away from, the idea that American institutions could be involved in human rights violations. Now, how much is that changing? Is that sense of moral shame spreading to our larger public discourse? I'm certainly not convinced it has yet, but the fact that these images of California's incredibly overcrowded prisons are now part of the popular imaginary of prisons and prisoners gives me some reason to hope. This was actually a picture that was in the New York Times about a month ago showing lamentable conditions in a Salvadorian prison, but what was really striking was how similar it looked like to the American images of California prisons. And so it was sort of, I think, some evidence of this cultural recognition that something really awful happened in our prisons and we ought to do something about it. It's a moment I've compared to the 18th century discovery of the jail, atrocious conditions in jail that were associated with John Howard's path-breaking book, The State of the Prisons. And in its own way, it can be related to the birth of humanitarian medicine, the birth of the Red Cross in the 19th century, when European publics were shocked by the images of dying soldiers left on the battlefield to fend for themselves. And what we now have today as the Geneva Conventions arose out of a kind of collective moral shame at the fate of military forces. Now, not only did this have an immediate effect also on military prisons, but if you think about the fact that we apply war on crime, the prisoner battlefield soldier analogy is an interesting one. So, to make a long story short, I think Brown versus Plata could be the beginning of the end of the dignity deficit in America, and therefore the beginning of a change in our approach to prisons. Now, Europe, as I said, looks like the after picture that we want to be in. Based on, if I'm correct, that a dignity-based framework can make a difference in a way that the civil rights framework that we have had has not done so well. And a tremendous scholarly enterprise, this book, Principles of European Prison Law and Policy, by Dirk Van Zyl-Smit and Sonia Snacken, is a 2009 book that really pulls together this European prison human rights legal framework and tries to show just how robust and broad a framework it is. So many of the things that we take to be policy, political issues here, like should prisons be rehabilitated or not, are treated in Europe as much more questions of human rights and dignity. And indeed, near the end of their book, Van Zyl-Smit and Snacken go so far as to suggest that dignity is now at the core of what they describe as a kind of pan-European ideal, as they put it, of how imprisonment should be used as restrictively as possible and implemented humanely. Right? So their story seems to be Europe has a penal ideal that has now been reshaped by dignity and human rights, in which prison is seen as a last resort, something that should be used restrictively, and in which there's a fundamental obligation, not as a policy matter, but as a matter of legal governance, to provide human rights for prisoners. Now, it's very apropos the humanitarian crisis in California, that recognition that healthcare is at the very core of prisoner human rights is something that happened in Europe in the 90s, basically. So, and here are just some of the highlights of that. I won't have time to go into the details. But as early as 1993, the very important European Committee for the Prevention of Torture and Inhuman or Degrading Treatment, which is a body I'm going to tell you a little bit more about in a moment, published a report. They published an annual report. This was their third general report in 1993, and it contained basically a set of norms and principles about prison healthcare that are basically define all the problems that we've had in California. As they established as norms and principles a commitment to providing the kind of healthcare that turned out to be catastrophically missing in California. In 1998, the Council of Europe, which is a body of essentially foreign minister-like level politicians from the member states, sit as a kind of European cabinet, if you will, and they have various lawmaking roles. You might think of this more as soft law than hard law, if you will, not necessarily law that tells officials in the member states exactly what they have to do, but which nonetheless establishes principles that they have to answer to. And that's something maybe in discussion with Leonidas we can flesh out what that really means. But in 1998, they also published a report with a very relevant title concerning the ethical and organizational aspects of healthcare in prison, 1998. In 2006, the points and principles raised in essentially both of those documents were implemented as part of Europe's prison rules, which is a body of norms and principles governing, in principle at least, how prisons all over Europe should be operating, and that has been revised a couple of times, and this was the most recent revision of it. And this is really part of a global, but mainly European movement toward recognizing prison health as the core of maintaining human rights in prisons. This is a quote from the Moscow Declaration on Prison Health as a part of public health, which was a part of the World Health Organization's European regional body. And I won't read all the details, but they offer a kind of critique of how prisons inevitably are sites of health disadvantage, and both because of who they collect and how they treat them. And that therefore, if you want to sort of get a handle on these powerful disadvantages that threaten the dignity of people in prison, you've got to have a core set of health strategies that you're basically using. As I said, one of the most important players here is the Committee for the Prevention of Torture. And if I could wave a magic wand and change one thing in California, or bring one thing to California that they got in Europe, it would be something like a Committee for the Prevention of Torture. The Committee for the Prevention of Torture, and that's not their full name, it's also inhuman and degrading treatment, is essentially it's a body not unlike the Red Cross. That is, it's kind of an investigatory body, but unlike the Red Cross, which just has, can ask for permission to investigate prisons and other places, the Committee for the Prevention of Torture can, in principle, show up at the door of any prison or asylum or mental hospital or old folks home, for that matter, in Europe and demand entry and inspect it. They then produce reports. As you can see, they're a multidisciplinary body that involves mostly lawyers and doctors, but also academics, criminologists, criminal law experts even, sociologists, shockingly. And they can come in and they investigate. Usually they don't actually show up in the middle of the night. They usually announce that they're coming, which you might think would give the member state a chance to tidy things up, and it may. And yet the reports that it produces are very, very critical. They tend to be not judgments, right? Because it's not the European Court of Human Rights. They're not saying that France or the UK has violated the convention. But what they do say is that these conditions endanger dignity, that they may be degraded, that they're in danger of becoming degraded. So they're kind of a preventive body, if you will. And what happens is that countries receive these reports, which theoretically they can maintain as private. They don't have to make them public, but virtually, with only a handful of exceptions, I think Russia, they may be an exception, they have published these reports. So I think it's a very important kind of body, one that we need in California. So let me just briefly, before I shut up for a little bit and give Leonidas an opportunity for a bit of a rejoinder from reality here, I want to just look at 5 issues, if you will, in prison health care that have been identified by these European human rights bodies as essential, not just to maintaining a healthy prison population, but to the larger structure of human rights in prisons. And that's what I think is, again, keep in mind that Brown versus Plata means that the one thing we know is that California prisons are going to be refocusing on healthcare over the next decade. And here what I want to suggest is there's a real opportunity here to not only improve healthcare, but to create an infrastructure that protects human rights on an ongoing basis. So one of the most important features of this infrastructure of human rights around healthcare is the notion that prisoners must have access to doctors, and it has to happen very soon upon admission to a prison. So the CPT's third general report, when entering a prison, all prisoners should without delay be seen by a member of the establishment's healthcare service, and if necessary, physically examined by a medical doctor as soon as possible after his admission. And as you can imagine, one of the functions of that kind of screening is to identify abuse in the system. If a prisoner is delivered to a prison and they receive a medical inspection and it's clear that they've been beaten, then there are questions to be asked, obviously, about the police or the court officials that have this person. Or they're transferred from prison A to prison B and they receive screening. You again have an opportunity to actually investigate what's happened, how's this person been treated. Not only do you have to have screening, but you have to have ongoing access. While in custody, prisoners should be able to have access to a doctor at any time, irrespective of their detention regime, whether they're on remand, as they would put it in Europe, or they're pretrial detainees, or whether they're convicted prisoners. Prisoners should be able to approach the healthcare service on a confidential basis, for example, by means of a message in a sealed envelope. For the prison officers should not seek to screen requests to consult with a doctor. Now that's at least the picture of what should happen in Europe. Here's a picture of what does or did happen in California. Here's an example from the Plata receiver opinion back in 2005. A prisoner repeatedly requested to see a doctor regarding acute abdominal and chest pain. The triage nurse canceled the medical appointment, thinking the prisoner was faking illness, right, deciding screening on a security basis whether it was a medical problem or not. When the prisoner requested transfer to another prison for treatment, his doctor refused the request without conducting an examination. The doctor did see the prisoner a few weeks later, but refused to examine him because the prisoner had arrived with a self-diagnosis, and the doctor found this unacceptable. The prisoner died 2 weeks later. So a second fundamental framework for human rights through medical care in prison is to have adequate medical records. A medical file should be compiled for each patient, containing diagnostic information as well as ongoing record of the patient's evolution and of any special examinations he's undergone. In the event of a transfer, the file should be forwarded to the doctors in the receiving establishment. So 2 things about medical records. One, if you're not getting treated with medical records, you're not really receiving modern medicine, right? It's emergency medicine. If you have to be treated by a doctor that hasn't been able to consult your medical records, the only condition in which that would not be malpractice, it would be in an emergency. Why? Because medical treatment can be as dangerous to you as it can be helpful if the doctor doesn't know what else is wrong with you, what other medications you're receiving, etc. And so, from a medical point of view, it's sort of a starting point to decent medicine to have records. But from a human rights point of view, it's also very important because the body is a site, it's a book of how a person has been treated. And if you want to understand what's happening to somebody over time, their medical records are a very important source of documentary information about that. Now, how are medical records kept in California? Well, here's another description from the Plata record. The amount of unfiled, disorganized, and literally unusable medical records, paperwork at some prisons is staggering. At CIM, one of the prisons so overcrowded that there were riots in 2006, the records were kept in a 30-foot trailer with no light except for a small hole cut into the roof and were arranged into piles without any apparent order. Right? So these are files or records that have no functional role, basically. They're actually an emblem of absolute neglect. Third, you've got to have access to specialists. Seeing a doctor, again, is only the first step in modern medicine. If you have a really acute condition, you need, or a chronic condition for that matter, you need to see a specialist. And so it's very important that the European framework that a prison's healthcare service should be at least able to provide regular outpatient consultations and emergency treatment. Further, prison doctors should be able to call upon the services of specialists. Outpatient treatment should be supervised as appropriate. Whenever prisoners need to be hospitalized or examined by a specialist in a hospital, they should be transported with the promptness and in the manner, i.e. not all locked up, required by their state of health. Specialists in Plata, again, the record was replete with time after time in which prisoners with dire medical conditions simply didn't get to see the specialists that would have identified soon-to-be fatal conditions. Fourth, and maybe the most single important of all, is medical independence. And this is from the CBT again. The healthcare staff in any prison is potentially at risk. Their duty to care for their patients may often enter into conflict with considerations of prison management and security. This can give rise to difficult ethical questions and choices. And what you see is that the CPT solution is that prison medical people have to be, quote, as closely as possible, they should be integrated or aligned as closely as possible with the mainstream of healthcare provision in the community at large. California, in contrast, the court found that custody staff pose a determined and persistent resistance to the delivery of even the most basic aspects of medical care. So not only do you not have medical independence, that is not only the medical personnel in California prisons not have strong connections to the medical community, in fact many of them have lost their license, which is why they're working in a prison hospital, but their authority is directly contravened by the security personnel who can just decide you're not sick, you're going back to the cell, even if the doctor has decided that they are. Finally, control of psychosis, because perhaps mental illness is not only one of the most significant chronic illness problems in prison, it is also